This is the beginning of chapter 1.2. What is mathematics? I get this question often, having taught mathematics for many, many years. Um, what is math? Why do we have to learn it? When are we ever going to use it, right? And students ask that many times, especially as they get older, middle school and high school and college. Um, we get that question often because they don't find it useful, or they're so used to school mathematics just being around completing assignments, getting points, um, follow the rules, that they don't see a purpose for it or need. So, what do you think, right? So, that would be a conversation we have in class. So, something to think about, pause, and hopefully ponder over a little bit. What is presented in our notes and in our textbook, because I want to remind you again, our textbook has a nice, more elaborative discussion and explanation of many of these ideas that I briefly touch on in the video. But I like this here. This is during my dissertation research many years ago. I asked students what is mathematics, and you can see this was middle schoolers. Numbers, problems, hard, uh, boring, and there's one here, torture, right? There's a lot of interesting comments what they think. There's one little awesome in there, but hopefully you had a chance to think about it. Presented are some different ideas from other mathematicians and writers and thinkers of our world. So you would want to take a look and see what they're thinking about. But ultimately, I like this idea of the science of patterns, right? We use math to study patterns. Patterns are everywhere, and our brain is always working in pattern making and always trying to make predictions based off of patterns. What's going to happen next? How are people behaving? What's the next number? When are we going to get this, right? Those types of things. And the other one that I like to follow is from Dr. Francis Su. And he has a book called Mathematics for Human Flourishing, which really talks about how doing mathematics develops many humanizing things in us that are worth thinking about, that contribute to professional growth, personal growth, our well-being, and help make us feel that we're growing in many different ways. So hopefully you had a chance to think about that. In this 1.1, we do a little bit of trying to show you what is mathematics from that perspective of looking at patterns, right? And beginning with, again, our textbook has some even more famous patterns, right? And I really like to talk about patterns of number, which most students think about famous patterns and where they appear, but there's also patterns of shapes, right? The different shapes that we encounter in the world. They're all mathematical in some way. So that's often overlooked, but what's also overlooked are patterns of just interactions of people and us making predictions. So keep that in mind as we start to do mathematics more in this class. These first examples are just simple examples of patterns. And of course, since we're talking about elementary mathematics, many times that starts with just simple basic numbers, looking at patterns that way. And we'll, in chapter 2, talk about patterns of sets and objects and things like that. But these, again, just a quick introduction about patterns. You can see, complete the table. And so you just start to use numbers to come up with ideas here. And we'll zoom in a little bit there. You will see it's going up by 3. This goes up by 3 and up by 3. There's this connection, right? This related connection. In calculus, we call it related rates. What happens when we change one variable? What happens to the other variable? How are they interconnected, right? It's an important thing. You change one thing and the other thing gets changed. And how are they changing with respect to each other? 3, 3, 3, which means if this one goes up by 1, this should go up by 1 too. Again, that's the idea, that we can make some predictions based off the patterns. And then this would be 23 and 12. But again, looking at patterns. This was a little bit more complex. A two-dimensional pattern here, looking at growing shapes. We call them like a pool. Not all pools are square, but to simplify it. And then we use some mechanism, which we'll learn in the next sections, around how to track our information, how to make an organized list or a table of values to help us identify a pattern. We take something and then create a list from it. And so in this case, you'll see it's 4 and then 8, and then 12, and so forth. And you could then make predictions about the 8th and 10th one, which turned to be 36 and 44. And if we look carefully, I don't expect expertise now, but to find a pattern, it looks like we're multiplying the top number by 4 in some way because it's up by 4, but you have to first add 1 to the top number. So 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 times 4 is 12, and that's how we got this one over here. 8 plus 1 is 9, 9 times 4 is 36. Again, this is based off the pattern. So that's our introduction to what is mathematics. Again, there's a lot more in the textbook to think about. We also have a nice interactive engagement here. You could see this activity if you want to kind of play around with that pattern problem a little bit more. You can by changing. You can also, it shows you the different ways to kind of count the patterns. That's what's kind of cool here. You could see different techniques of how they come up with the numbers just based off of there's 4, and then it looks like the original 4 in red, and then we added 4, and then you still have the original 4 in red, and then you add 4 more. So you can see that pattern of going up by 4 is essential here when you add those blue ones. So that's one method, and you could see, I think there was another method here. There are 4 different ones, and then you just keep adding 4 more of those, right? Just add 1 more red, 1 more blue, 1 more orange, 1 more purple, add 1 more. And that's where that 4 comes from. So there's a lot of awesome creative ways to think about it. And again, in class, we would have time to really dive deeper into that, but this can help you do that. I encourage you to take the time to go through that interactive in the textbook as you start to think about what is mathematics.